Ready? إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. قال الله تعالى في كتابه العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال له موسى هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا وكيف تصبر على ما لم تحط به خبرا. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. May Allah send His peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Welcome to the Khutbah online. Of course, we can't do a real khutbah, but in the absence of what is a beautiful tradition that many of us are missing, we thought we'd try and recreate some semblance of a khutbah. You'll still need to pray your 4 rak'ahs of dhuhr at the end, and you can pray them in congregation with your family. But to attend some form of education and sermon is a beautiful thing for us to revive, and alhamdulillah for the internet to allow us to do that. Allah Azza wa Jal says, when describing the story of Musa alayhi salam, that Musa, upon meeting Al-Khidr, who is a mysterious man charged with acting out God's plan, acting out God's order in ways that perhaps we'd not heard of before. And unless it was in the Quran, we probably would not believe. Musa alayhi salam asked him the question, may I follow you, provided that you teach me some of the right guidance that you've been taught. Al-Khidr, who in the Quran hasn't been mentioned by name, is described to reply, you will not be able to bear with me patiently. How could you bear patience in matters beyond your experience? Now what's interesting, given the times that we live in, is we can often try and wonder, what is God's plan? How do we understand the wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jal in our affairs? And Musa, being one of the greatest prophets, described as Ul Azmi min al-Rusul, one of the greatest 5 human beings to have lived on this earth, was a man who God loved and taught and spoke to directly. But yet, some of the wisdoms that Allah Azza wa Jal had taught to Sayyidina Khidr, had taught to this curious man, weren't revealed to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. But the thing I want to focus on in these specific ayahs is the use of the words Allah Azza wa Jal has chosen, something that might elude those who don't speak the Arabic language. When describing the words of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, he says, قَالَ لَهُ مُوسَى هَلْ أَتَّبِعُكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُعَلِّمَنِي. He says, let me follow you so that you may teach me. Ilm. Ilm is knowledge, something which is taught, which is received and understood, and then applied later on. And he says, مِمَّا عُلِّمْتَ رُشْدًا, something which you were taught. Now, interestingly, when Khidr replies to that statement, he doesn't say, how can you, when he says, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا, it says, how would you be patient at that which you do not have experience? Now, most of the translations actually use the word knowledge here. But khubr is from the word khabara, which is to have experience of something. Now, we know experience only comes after an action has happened. It doesn't come before. You can learn something before, but you can't have an experience of it until it's manifested and then you've lived through it. We live in times which we've read about in the books. We've heard of plagues happen before. We've seen Al-Haram al-Sharif being closed to the public previous years, sometimes for over 10 years in some cases. We've seen cases of people dying. We've heard of these cases of people being trapped in their homes. We've heard of these horrific cases, but until we live the experience, we do not truly know how our reaction will be. Now, this story, which will be the basis of this khutbah, reveals to us an understanding of how Allah Azza wa Jal works in the cosmos. We are like Sayyidina Musa. We can interact with this world in a lens that we've been taught through our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, taught through our tradition. How do we understand the world and make sense of it? But naturally, we are constricted by the laws and the regulations and the rules that Allah has applied to us. But sometimes there's wisdoms and there's actions that take place that we cannot fathom unless we were to see the bigger picture. And the only one who can see the bigger picture is Allah Azza wa Jal, who is beyond space and time. For us, it's our duty to trust. And it's for Allah Azza wa Jal to fulfill the promise that He won't deny or He won't forget those who believe in Him. So when we hear of this story, there's many things and many points that we could look into. Many people, when they hear the concept of why is there tribulation, why are there testing times amongst human beings, why does Allah choose to do this to us? The question is a complex one, but the answer can be rather simple. Allah Azza wa Jal, when He punishes someone, it may feel like a punishment, but you don't know where the true benefit lies. When the cold of winter comes, we feel the bitterness and the difficulty of it. But had that cold not come, our crops would never be able to grow in the spring, as the insects would take over the world, eating our crops and our flowers. When a loved one passes away, we may question the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. Why is He taking this person from us? But had He not taken the life of a person whose time was due, how could the new lives come to be born in this earth, which will become overpopulated had everyone survived and lived and thrived within this earth? Each of our calamities may seem like a calamity, but Allah Azza wa Jal has a balanced order, a mizan, which is taking place in this world, and each of which is held in a perfectly calculated way. And it's for us to trust in that will of Allah Azza wa Jal, particularly in times like these, when we hear stories of death, stories of illness, of people taken by what is a very difficult circumstance, to trust that there is a wisdom and a benefit in this when you consider the whole picture. There's a famous statement by Imam Ali, quoted to have said, لو كشفت الغطاء ما ازددت يقينا. If the veils were to be lifted, I would not be increased in certainty. And there's another phrase in Arabic, they say, if you were to know the options, if you were to be able to see the unseen, you wouldn't have chosen. لما اخترتم من الواقع. You wouldn't choose anything except that which has already occurred to you. Sheikh Sha'rawi quoted a story of a wise man who people would consistently complain of their difficulties. So he asked them to write, every time someone complained, to write their difficulty on a piece of paper and place it in a box. Then when they came back and they opened the box and they were looking through it, and he said, find your piece of paper. They would shuffle through all the different pieces of paper and they'll just put them aside and put them aside. And he goes, why are you putting them aside? And he goes, well, I want my problem. I don't want these other problems. They'll see what other people are facing and they'll say, well, alhamdulillah, that this is actually what I'm facing is relatively easy. This world is a place of test. And it's important we understand Allah Azza wa Jal's wisdom, Allah Azza wa Jal's plan in all of these affairs. So let's return to the story of Sayyidina Musa, a story which can be split into approximately 4 parts, or 5 if you consider the ending. The first, and perhaps the most intriguing part, is the journey in which Musa alayhi salam underwent to find Al-Khidr. One of the interesting aspects of this story isn't necessarily the parts which are mentioned, but rather it's the parts which aren't mentioned. Why has Allah chosen to omit certain parts of the story and include other parts? Why has Allah chosen to describe the details in which Musa alayhi salam ventures to meet Al-Khidr and describe certain aspects of that journey, but then omits other parts which we know from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam as he conveyed them? Musa alayhi salam describes a journey of great wonder in his process to meet Sayyidina Khidr. What more could you have than a dead fish which you are taking and carrying for your dinner, coming to life and venturing into the sea? A miraculous event. But we know the life of Sayyidina Khidr, the life of Sayyidina Musa was a life full of miraculous events. And amidst the splitting of the sea and the water coming from the stone and the water turning into blood, whilst a fish coming to life in our day and age may be a great miracle, At the time of Sayyidina Khidr, it was a single miracle amongst a plethora of miracles. His servant, Yusha bin Nun, noticed this, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ describes them both as seeing this at wonder. But when they go and they venture on, they forget that incident, and they forget that that was the incident which they were looking for. The reason this story is mentioned, and perhaps one of the wisdoms of this, is that sometimes we can witness truly miraculous things that happen in our life. Incidents that are in and of themselves enough to make us wake up and be aware of God. We're living in the midst of unprecedented times, times which for anybody would make them wake up to the realities of God and the realities of the world around them. But yet, it's not until those things are taken from us that we begin to realize their benefit. When we're surrounded by miracles, it's only when the miracle is gone, it's only when the absence of that gift is taken from us that we begin to realize that benefit. Only the other day, our boiler broke, and for 4 days, 5 days, we were living in the cold. I'd never noticed how warm a house could be, so normal that you just walk around and you're used to the comfort of that heat until it's taken away. And how quickly do we become accustomed again with the warmth of a house the moment the boiler returns, as if it was almost entitled to you. Let us think in the midst of these difficulties, where even going to the shop is restricted, visiting family is restricted, simply the most simple of journeys, shaking hands. Apparently, you cannot even pay cash anymore in certain shops because that's been taken away from us. Let's think about how important and how valuable these gifts are to us before they're taken away. Allah says, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. Few of my servants are grateful, because it's very difficult to be grateful until the time is taken away from you, until the gift is taken away from you. Now we venture into the specifics of the story. And Musa alayhi salam meets Sayyidina al-Khidr. And as I already described, he asks him that he can venture with him on this journey in order for him to learn some of the details that Sayyidina al-Khidr has been taught from. Al-Khidr responds that he won't be able to be patient on something he hasn't experienced, something he cannot understand until he sees the wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Now we know the stories that are to come, stories which confound Sayyidina Musa, which baffle him as to what is happening here. This is going against everything that I've been taught. Sayyidina Khidr here to us is like the illnesses and the diseases and the difficulties we see. We struggle to understand how this could be good in any way. It's mind-boggling. It doesn't make sense to us. But only when you fast forward and you see the greater picture do you begin to understand the wisdoms within the story, the wisdoms behind God's plan. The first is Sayyidina al-Khidr and Sayyidina Musa venture on a boat after they sought help from a series of people asking if they could ride the boat to cross the river that they sailed. Only one person offered them a ride. These kind souls that said, come with us on our boat and we'll take you over to the other side of the river. فَانْطَلَقَا حَتَّى إِذَا رَكِبَا فِي السَّفِينَةِ خَرَقَهَا. Allah describes that after they've ventured onto this boat, Al-Khidr begins to damage the boat. Now perplexed, Sayyidina Musa says, قَالَ أَتُخْرِقُهَا لِتُغْرِقَ أَهْلَهَا لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا إِمْرًا. Are you damaging it in order that you can drown its people? You've committed something that's heinous, that's really bad. At this point, and part of the wisdom is that Khidr says to him, I told you, you won't be able to bear with me. You won't be able to be patient in this incident. Now, he didn't tell him the response immediately. He didn't, in fact, tell him the response until Sayyidina Musa asked it for it later. But Musa alayhi salam knew that this man was charged with the affairs of God. And if God was in command of something, he should be just, and he should be appreciative that Allah Azza wa Jal will not be unjust with anybody. So he remained silent and he says, I will continue on this journey and forgive me for having spoken out loud. So they continue the journey, and perhaps a more perplexing incident happens. فانطلقا حتى إذا لقيا غلاما فقتله. So they traveled together until they found a child, and he killed him. قال أقتلت نفسا بغير نفس لقد جئت شيئا نكرا. He said, have you killed a person wrongfully? You killed a person without them having committed the murder themselves, which is one of the reasons why someone can potentially face capital punishment. You faced something even greater in evil. And Khidr again responds, you won't be able to be patient with me. Didn't I tell you, you won't be able to be patient in something you have not experienced? Now, it's important to say at this point, no, we're not condoning murder. In fact, the point of this story is that murder cannot ever be condoned. It cannot ever be accepted. But this was Al-Khidr, who was manifesting what he saw to be the will of God. And Allah had commanded him with this task. A task that none of us, even Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, would accept, that murder can be allowed. But Allah is using this incident to teach us why Allah would bring death upon somebody, and why some of the benefits after you hear the news of that death. The third incident, so they carried on, and this is the final chance now for Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. So they travel for a long journey, and they become very fatigued. So they arrive at a city, asking them for help, asking them for food and drink. فاستطعما أهلها فأبوا أن يضيفوهما فوجد فيها جدارا يريد أن ينقض فأقام. So then, after asking these people for help, none of them helped them. How miserly could you be when you see someone disheveled, having traveled for a long period of time, in need of food and drink, and every single one universally turns them away? So Al-Khidr turns to find a ruined wall, and he begins to repair it. So Musa alayhi salam turns to him and says, if you had wished, you could have asked a compensation. You could have asked a wage for having done what you did. At this point, Al-Khidr says, we cannot continue this journey. It's not going to be something you can bear. Your chances are up. But let me explain to you the wisdoms behind each of these actions. The first is that when I was traveling on this boat, whilst you only saw the damage happening on the boat, whilst you only saw the illnesses inflicted upon people, whilst you only saw the restrictions being placed on you in your household, what you didn't see is the king that was following us, taking every single ship to his fleet. So when I damaged the boat, I was damaging it whilst it was a harm for those people. It prevented a greater harm, that the king would take their boat from them. And if you'd known this bigger picture, you would have been contented with that fact. As for the child, murder is of course a great and terrible and a heinous crime. But this child was going to grow to become very difficult for their parents, and the parents are righteous people. So whilst the child's life was taken, it was taken in a manner that would prevented them from an even more difficult trial, a more difficult pain, which is that of a child that is disobedient and a child who's causing havoc at home. And the third of the wall that you saw being built, I wasn't building it for those people. There were two children who Allah saw that their father was a righteous man. And because of their father being a righteous man and he had passed away, he'd buried a treasure under this wall. So me building this wall was to protect that treasure for those people. And although we didn't take our wage, we wouldn't take our wage because we weren't working for those people. We were working for the children. And had they seen this wall being built, and had we taken our wage, they might have discovered the treasure. Each of these bears a wisdom of the bigger plan that Allah has. Al-Khidr manifests divine inspiration that Allah himself said he gave to him, and that's why he acted in the ways he acted. But what we take from them is that when Allah makes a decision, when Allah acts in a way that we can't understand, that we struggle to conceive, number one, we trust in Allah. We don't shake. This is the point where we move from knowledge to experience. You've known all along, you've studied your Islamic studies book, you've been to all the circles. You've heard khutbah after khutbah. But now's the time you experience it. Now's the time you live that. And you see, are you able to be the patient person you said you would? Are you able to be the courageous person you said you would? Are you able to be that hero that you always dreamt that you would? The second is that we understand the complex affairs in which this world works. This world is in its nature a test. And is a test not just of you. And as human beings, we have a very egocentric approach to the world. We see the world that is me, it's Talha living life. But the reality of the world is that I'm being tested, you're being tested, John next door is being tested. We're all being tested at the same time. And the nature of that test and the nature of free will is our tests affect one another. So Allah Azza wa Jal, when He's conducting these affairs, He's conducting things in the fairest, most just ways, whilst also affording us our freedom to be tested. If Allah Azza wa Jal was to give everything that I wanted, it would come at the expense of other people. If I was to be given all the money in the world and everything was comfortable for me, then someone by definition has to make my food because I'm not doing anything. Someone by definition has to build my house because I'm not going to build it. People need to toil. Allah can't make everyone a millionaire because the world won't function. So when we learn of God's plan, when we see of news, we have to understand that this is the best of affairs for us. And if we were to see the bigger picture, we would agree entirely with the course that we've lived. And whilst it may be difficult, and whilst Sayyidina Musa himself was told by Al-Khidr that there is no way he can bear something which he hasn't experienced, we know the truth. We've been taught the truth. And now's the time for us to understand God's plan, to live its reality, and to prove that we are the good Muslims that we always hope we'd be. Just as a reminder, this of course is not a formal khutbah because it doesn't meet the conditions to do a khutbah over the internet. So now for your families, stand and pray 4 rak'ahs for dhuhr, and of course with the sunnahs as well. You can pray them together in congregation just like you would normally pray dhuhr salah. Not 2 rak'ahs like you would do for Jum'ah, you have to pray the full 4 rak'ahs because it doesn't count. However, inshallah, you will be rewarded the reward of Jum'ah because you have been intending to do this for a long time, and had these conditions not been upon us, you would have performed Jum'ah. So your reward is twice, one for attending Jum'ah and one for obeying the laws of the country, which has told us to stay within our lands and just told us to stay within the house, and many other rewards such as protecting the health of our elders and our young people who may suffer from this. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.